Hello and welcome to the 66th TiddlyWiki Hangout. I'm Jeremy Ruston, the inventor of TiddlyWiki, and I'm joined today from left to right by Mario. Mario, would you like to say hi and where you're from and something about your involvement with TiddlyWiki?
Yeah, hi, my name is Mario Pitsch from Austria, near Salzburg. Contributor to TiddlyWiki Classic with themes and plugins, and with for TiddlyWiki 5, mainly with translations. Yeah, at the moment.
Indeed. Head of translations, I think. And Nathan, would you like to say hi, where you're from, and something about your work with TiddlyWiki?
Hi, I'm Nathan Kane from the United States, and I'm a developer working with TiddlyWiki 5 for quite some time now.
Cool. Well, thank you both for joining us. We're starting today with Mario and Nathan, who both collaborate with me on the development of TiddlyWiki. So we're going to take the opportunity to cover some development topics, which will maybe change if depending on who else joins us for today's chat. So the first thing we were going to talk about was about translations of TiddlyWiki. So one of the very cool things over the last year, well, I'm not sure when I made TiddlyWiki translatable, but I think it was in the spring this year, and very soon after the ability to translate TiddlyWiki was introduced, we were lucky enough to get submitted translations, German translations from Mario, Chinese translation, French translation, and slightly less well maintained a Japanese translation. And there's been plenty of demand since then for people to create translations for TiddlyWiki. The problem is that until recently, the instructions for people who wish to make a translation are incredibly complex. First, they need to be running under Node.js so that they can build a TiddlyWiki from the individual files. So that implies some understanding, knowledge of Node.js, not being afraid of Node.js at any rate. And much worse, in fact, they also need to know about GitHub because of the process for actually submitting a translation. And it's turned out that both those two requirements are quite onerous. And my impression is that they were putting people off who might be able to perform translations. And in fact, even for people who've mastered those two things, who have mastered using the Node.js edition and using GitHub, the translation process has still been quite roundabout. You work in an editor over here, you make a change, then you have to recompile the wiki, go to the browser and review the change to see if it looks right in context. And that's a slow, tedious process. When you're in the text editor, it requires a phenomenal feat of imagination to be able to visualize what the text is going to look like in the correct context. So what I did a kind of very first pass at last week was a much... Yes, I'll switch on screen sharing. Was a much simpler browser-based way to do translations. So I will just screen share, and I'm going to compile the thing. So TiddlyWiki Editions, Translators Edition, and we'll build that, and then go to the browser to look at it, and here it is. So it's an ordinary TiddlyWiki. In fact, the sidebar is hidden by default. There's a different background color to make it less confusing for me. There are some instructions, but roughly the meat of the thing is this translators tiddler. So coming from the top, it lists the number of tiddlers that have been translated out of the total number of translatable strings. It reproduces the page layout toolbar, so it's the same as there. And if I add a new toolbar button, not only does it appear here in the sidebar, it also appears in the translator widget. and it groups into these different tabs the various translatable strings, and they are listed with a title. And if we click on that title, then we get the underlying tiddler. So in this case, the full title of the tiddler is config new journal tags, but we just list an abbreviated version of the title here. And then this text box contains, to begin with, the English text of that string, and then to convert it into a foreign language, you just retype it. So that, I don't think, corresponds to any real language. When you do that, you overwrite the existing English text, but it's available in this drop-down even after you've rewritten it, so that you can see what the old content was. There's also a button in the drop-down to delete the translation. Actually, before I do that, though, I should have shown you how, as soon as I started typing there, the total number of translated tiddlers changed. I can do the same thing here by adding some text to this guy, and now we've got 2 tiddlers translated, and in fact you should be able to see that in the normal way the link has changed as well. So to revert, we say delete translation, and the string returns to its previous value. And then up here we've got a combo box that lets us select whether to show all strings, just those that have been translated, or just those that have not been translated, and the idea being that makes it easier to spot things that haven't been translated.
Jeremy, can you switch to strings that have not been translated? And now select one and type one character.
Oh, yes. And it disappears immediately. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I mean, with all the weirdnesses that there are with this, I mean, I think there's obviously plenty of improvements we can make to this, and I comfort myself by thinking at least it's easier than learning Git.
Yeah. Really nice. It's quite nice. And I think it has a really big advantage. For example, so the Japanese translation, there were some texts not translated,
yes.
And to finding those texts, so this
was very
box makes perfect sense. Yeah.
I'll just whiz through the remaining features. You can switch to a multi-line editor. That applies to all of the tiddlers. Most of the time, for most translatable tiddlers, the single line display makes the most sense. It makes it easier to scan what's going on. But there are some things, like, for instance, the getting started tiddler, which are generally quite long, and it's much easier to edit with the multi-line editor. So just show one example then with control panel. Let's see that basics, there's the caption of the basics tab. So let's change that to fundamentals. Gosh, I don't understand why that moved when I started typing it. However, I shall skip over.
I think it's because of the filter. So I think the filter.
Yes, but I don't think it used to do that. But maybe it did. Yes, of course, the filter's picking out the non-shadow tiddlers first.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So we need to resort them. Okay, but so I was just changing the name of the basics tab, and then I was going to switch to the control panel so that one can see it. There you can see the text fundamentals. So it's much easier to see the impact of changes by being able to flick between tiddlers. Much easier than it was when one was working in an editor, but it still requires a good deal of scrolling in order to jump around. So what's going on here then is when I'll refresh so that we've got an go back to an empty wiki. So at the moment, what each of these editors is showing is the shadow tiddler value of that string, and if I switch language, then it'll actually show the shadow value from that language. So it means that actually you can use the tool to maintain an existing translation as well. And then as soon as I start typing, then I'm creating a non-shadow tiddler that then lives in the wiki. So if I do a few very silly translations, and then, oh, I don't know, let's go to the, going to control panel in Russian turns out to not be very helpful for me. But now we can see there's two tiddlers in this wiki. Those are the two tiddlers that I translated. And at this point, they're not shadow tiddlers, they're real tiddlers. So the idea is I can, as I work on the translation, I can save it using TiddlyFox or whatever technique I normally use to save the wiki. Then the stage that we haven't really covered properly yet is what happens when people have completed a translation. Obviously, we want to keep them away from GitHub. So the simplest thing I can think of is where a user, having created a translation, then literally emails the HTML file to me or to Mario. Next best would be if the translator puts up the translation on, for instance, a Dropbox URL that we can go and get whenever we need to, if you see what I mean. And then we need to have some process that slurps in these translations and takes the real tiddlers that they contain and puts them into the correct files for the TiddlyWiki repo. And then me or Mario would then submit those to the repo on behalf of the translator. Then when the new version of TiddlyWiki comes out that includes those translated texts, the translator would be able to download a new version of the Translators Edition and then use that for continuing their work. So once we've got that second part of being able to split the translated TiddlyWiki into the correct files, then we'll have not only a round trip, but we'd have a round trip. You'd have the ability for a translator to be able to make translations, for them to get into the TiddlyWiki core distribution, for them to download a new version of the Translators Edition that includes their translations. So just to be clear about that last stage that we don't have yet, and so this is actually the bit that I've got to work on first because it's necessary for me to be able to process the translations that have been submitted. So here I'm in my text editor, I'm looking at the TiddlyWiki repo. There's a language folder inside the core folder, and this establishes the structure that then all the other languages follow for the layout of their files. So there's some folders that contain individual tiddlers, and there's some multids files that contain a bunch of tiddlers. And as far as I can tell, the best way to do this, to be able to output those files, is a series of render tiddler commands that render specific templates. So each one of these files would need to be templated, and you can hear, for instance, how that's pretty easy, in fact. The trouble is that the scripts that we end up with are going to need maintenance each time we introduce a new translatable file. But they're not going to need generally then. So sorry.
Yeah, continue.
I was just going to say that if we just add, as I for instance did this week, I added a new field to the search strings, which is this guy, default results. So that kind of change would be fine because the template for generating this file, in fact, would work by outputting all of the non-shadow tiddlers whose title starts with this prefix, so it would automatically pick up that default results string. But there are other changes, such as introducing a new help command here, which would require careful maintenance. Anyway, the good thing is that if I or anybody else forgets to do that maintenance, then the translators are going to notice, because they won't be able to find the translatable strings that they're expecting to see.
So, Jeremy, a short question. But I think wouldn't it be easier if the files that are created are grouped like the Translators Edition? So, for example, you have the buttons and I don't know, and control panel and date and this stuff, so that you just, if you need to create multi-tiddlers, that you take the structure from the Translators Edition. So it would be different to the to what we have if you use GitHub, but I think it would be easier to maintain, wouldn't it?
Yeah. So you're saying you're raising the question that translations that have been produced in this way don't necessarily need to use the same file structure.
Yes.
We use it in the repo, and we could design a file structure corresponded better with the tabs that we have.
Yeah, and I think it also could include. I don't know. Would it be possible to have single tiddlers, or would the plugin be the language plugin be bigger?
No, it wouldn't make any difference to the size of the language plugin if we use.
Okay, so then I think if we create a structure that is similar to the Translators Edition, it will be easy to find anyway. So you know that all the button translations are in a buttons directory, so it's easy to find.
So your specific recommendation is that we use directories with the names of the tabs that we've already got, and that the contents be single tiddlers. Yes, I mean, I think if we do that, we should change the existing languages to work in the same way, to be laid out in the same way, because
I think it would be possible.
It makes sense to be consistent, and yes, there's no reason why we couldn't do that. I'll see how it goes with. I mean, the thing about the current structure is, I mean, is very close to the tabs that we have in the Translators Edition. You know, the way that those tabs worked was determined by the existing layout of the files. Yeah, I'll see how it goes. I mean, I'm anyway interested in at the moment, you know, if there are people who are still editing in a text editor, I think having multids files is still useful. So I don't want to make the experience worse for people who are translating in the traditional way. I also slightly think this is quite an interesting technique because, you know, as we've discussed, we also want people to be able to submit documentation improvements in the same way. And, you know, the same question arises at that point. Right now, we're in the situation where the repo is hand-structured, and that's done with some care to try and make the repository layout comprehensible to people. If we went for a more automated layout, and here I'm talking about the layout of the tw5.com edition folder, yeah, it would be a change. So I don't know, I'll have a look. I mean, the templates that I'm talking about, I don't think will be particularly complicated. The dependency that I mentioned of needing to maintain those templates when we add a new translatable file, I don't think is too onerous, in fact. I mean, there's already changes that could, there's already certain changes that we could make to the translatable strings, which would require a change in the translator edition, because the translator edition has a series of filters in it to identify the tiddlers, the translatable tiddlers, you know, that should appear in each tab. So, and that kind of dependency is, yeah, I mean, hard to avoid, I think.
Yeah, I also think that it's not that difficult. So the existing documentations, you just can, let's say, change them and then use the same import mechanism, and then you get the same file structure. So for the existing stuff, it's not really a problem. The only thing is the multids files are easy to translate. So you are right. But
yeah,
anyway,
and then
we will see.
And templating them is incredibly easy. I mean, you've seen how we template out .tid files, for instance, in the file system adapter, so that the infrastructure we need, I think, is there. So one half done, a edition that runs in the browser that gives you dynamic interactive text boxes for each translatable string. other half still to do to be able to crack one of those files open and put the files in put the underlying tiddlers in the right place. Mario has done some looking into improvements to the user interface. So I guess as somebody who is actually doing the translations, he's interested in making that experience as good as possible. And I guess the problem that you're particularly looking at, Mario, it's easier to see a preview of the action, of the appearance of a particular translatable string. Yeah. Do you want to screen share and show it, or shall I?
Okay. So
awesome.
Can you see it?
Yeah.
Okay, so this is the Translators Edition, and okay, it normally starts like this. I did change the tabs layout a little bit, so I want to have it on the top, so that I get a little bit more space here again, because I need both sides. You can see it's multi-column, so it's 2 columns now. And then I added a new column here, which gives some additional buttons, and these buttons can open in the right sidebar. There is a new story, and they open the context. So for example, if I have the advanced search caption here, the advanced search is here, and if I start changing it, I get a live preview. And I think so. This was the goal, that I have the possibility to open the right context for the translation. So there is the button, advanced button, and you can see it changes the text here. Then here we have some more text, whatever, and you can see it live changing. So this is a standard tiddler. I can close it again and go to the next one, which is the cancel caption for the edit, for the tiddler edit template. So I'm opening a dummy tiddler in edit mode, and here I have the cancel button. So there is the hover element. So this is the cancel hint. So if I change it, you can see it. Oh, why not? I have to open it again probably. Yeah, and now I get the cancel hint. And as you can see for the button, this is the same thing. But I need to see the text, so that's why I did add some checkboxes here, which change the layout. So I can say, okay, cancel in German is abbrechen. Okay, and now I can see it here in the right side where I have the right context. So this is basically the idea, that we have the possibility here with some additional buttons to display the right context. So for example, okay, I did it for this close caption again. It's this one. So if I open it, I get the close button. If I check box, if I check the checkbox, the text is displayed. And now if I change the text, oops, why not? Oh, this is not live updating. Funny. Okay, so there is some more work to do, but I think the basic idea, you got the basic idea, that we have the possibility now to display everything in the right context. So for example, as you did the control panel, there is already a control panel link, so I can open the control panel. Oops, but there is some errors. Okay, so I didn't check this one. And then you should have the possibility to translate everything. Okay. Now I didn't do the changes here, so I just did it for the buttons.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, but yeah, that's the basic idea. So everything would be in the same context. I needed to have scroll bars here because otherwise, if you have on the left side, if you have many texts and then you scroll down, then you have to scroll up again to see the change. So that's why I did create scroll bars here, so that you basically can stay in one layout, and you always have everything together.
And one of the questions you raised in email was, wouldn't it be cool if we could highlight the right part of the content tiddler? Which, yes, I'd have to agree with, but can't quite see a way to do.
Yeah, I think I was thinking about some special classes, but the problem is, I think then you also need some special widgets that provide the classes, because at the moment we don't need this feature.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think when you start typing, and on the right you see something changes. So, for example, if I go back to the buttons, and then if I start typing, I can see it here. So I think this is much better already. And as I found out, I think it would be quite interesting also to open this Translators Edition only with these buttons, and then get the text and click the button, and then you get the context where it is. So it's probably some interactive course about the UI would be possible.
So, sorry, can you explain that again? Modify
so the mechanism with these additional buttons. So you could say, okay, I don't know, how is this called? This is the page buttons, the main page buttons. So you could have some explanations, and then you click a button, and then you get the right context. So just for exploring the UI.
Oh, you mean not for translators?
No, not for translation. So a new application, interactive, I don't know, tutorial about the TiddlyWiki UI, so that you get introduced to the control panel, what's on the control panel. If I click it, because the control panel has a lot of different tabs, so you can see, for example, you go to the control panel, open the control panel, then you get some information here, and then you click it, and it automatically changes the tab, because we have access to the tiddler, and here we have a description. You say click, and it selects the right tab. So this is just some brainstorming for additional.
That's very cool. My most constructive thought, well, is intended to be constructive, is I wonder actually if a sub-story is the best way to do it. I wondered if instead you could make it so that clicking the button in the center column just transcluded a specified hint tiddler into the right-hand panel.
Yeah, would be also possible.
And then that hint tiddler, in the case of the toolbar buttons, it could transclude a tiddler through the tiddler view template that would show all the correct buttons. The other thing is that you've got a global checkbox for turning on the caption text in the buttons. Because that is actually controlled by a variable, you could, in the preview pane, have a set widget that's specified to show the text just for the, just within it context. And the only reason I suggest that is, although I take your point about the scrolling, I feel that at the moment sub-stories are quite complex and counterintuitive for users. We don't have the right visual cues to show people what's going on. I think it would be, to make sub-stories work better, we should have some selective CSS on sub-stories that make them look a bit different. And but I think the idea is fine. If we went with the I think either approach, actually. I think in some cases, rather than transcluding one may want to fake the context in which the translation is going to appear in order to make it clearer. So rather than using the actual control panel, for instance, with buttons, we could the preview could be just the button with text turned on.
I also thought about just displaying the button, or for the control panel, for example, just displaying one tab element, one tab tiddler. But I think the context also is important, because, for example, these buttons, they appear in the info section of the tiddler. And in the case of, for example, for the German translation, sometimes you have to start something with a capital letter and other things with lowercase letters. But for the buttons for the tiddler, I wanted to have everything lowercase. So it's not only the text for a single tiddler that matters, but also the context, how it is displayed.
Yeah, I think that's true for the when I'm doing the English text as well. You need to see it in. But what I'm saying is that sometimes the original tiddler, and particularly thinking about tooltips, doesn't make a good preview. Although it does get you thinking about a mechanism that would replace tooltips with a little absolute positioned yellow div in the right place, so that within a particular context of the render tree, we make tooltips be directly visible. But then, you'd have to do some appearing over the top of each other and stuff like that.
And also as I said in the email, it is a lot of work to prepare all the context tiddlers. So it's not every text needs its own context. So because some buttons share the same context, so there is only one button that is needed. But still, it is a hell lot of work to make it interactive in that way. So we have to find out how we really want to do it, because changing it may be the same work again.
And I think what we're seeing already is a first wave of pent up demand for the ability to do translations. That means that although these improvements are, I think, very desirable and make a big difference, I'm not sure that they. I think we'll still have plenty of translations on our hands, even with the Translators Edition as it is at the moment. But I think the approach you're taking of just working on one tab of the Translators Edition, rather than embarking on creating those hint tiddlers for all 500 translatable strings to begin with, that's probably a good way to start.
I also was thinking a little bit about, I did some tweaking, if you can remember the TagsManager, because sometimes TagsManager shows 2 lines, and I did some tweaking so that the TagsManager looks like this. And I could imagine a similar mechanism, because we talked about it, that only the checkbox is a little bit not enough information. So there should be some text that explains, okay, if you check this box, then it enables all the texts of the button, so you can see what you are translating or something like this. So I would imagine, something in that format, so that you get the buttons that says, okay, I will open the control panel advanced tab. You can select it, so it will open, I don't know, a dummy tiddler, and it will select the info tab, and so on. And so you can click, and then okay, if you click that button, then some explanation what's going on the right side will make it easier, because at the moment we just have this button. So I did specify a tooltip, so what it actually does, but for the there is also one. But I think a little bit more of information which is always visible wouldn't hurt in
Yes, I mean, I think that's why I like the idea of the button in the middle always opening a tiddler on the right, because you've got a bit of fixed explanatory text at the top of the right hand column, but that should in many cases, I think, be specific to the string, and that's our opportunity to tell people to look for the tooltip or what have you. But by the way, I don't want to get too distracted, but the TagsManager that you just showed there, I think is an improvement over the last version that I saw. Would you like to fling it over? Because that is certainly something. I think when we were last talking about it, it was just before the release. It was a few days before the release, and I was trying to avoid making big changes, but I think that would be something that's worth fixing.
Yeah, so there is only one thing. If I click the close button here, then it changes the size of the tab. So I didn't fix this, but I think it's possible with some CSS. So and here is now the I think this was one of your concerns, that at the very beginning the icon chooser still sticks to this place. Now it moves. So you really have the element here, and then you have the chooser.
Okay, is that why you've got something funny going on with the table cell borders?
Yeah, this is a table in the table. So this is a second table in this in the row here.
Why is there no bottom border in the two right-hand cells of the so up there up the
I think I don't know. I don't know. It's probably CSS,
so, I mean,
and I liked it, so that's why I didn't change it.
Yes.
So.
Okay. Well, let's fling that over, and I would like to and get it into the core.
Yeah, I will create a pull request for this one. Yeah. It's not a big change, but yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yeah, I think it's an improvement. So two things then we'll keep going. I'll be working on outputting the files, and as we discussed, explore those two different ways of doing it. And I think if you've got any time to iterate that improved design for the translator UI, that would be great.
Yeah, I think one thing which I think is important for the workflow. Do you have a link to the Translators Edition? Because I only have the modified one.
I think the pre-release version may still be up, but I'm not sure. It may not be.
Is it TiddlyWiki?
But TiddlyWiki, if it is, it's tiddlywiki.com/pre-release/edition.
Translators index.
Yes, it does seem to be there.
Okay. Yeah, I got it. So I switched to screen sharing again. So what I think personally with the workflow, I really like the multi-line view, because then you can do something like this. So journal, it's the same in German, but okay. So this tiddler contains binary data. So you say dieser Tiddler enthält so then you can translate it, and then you delete it. So as long as you are translating the text, you still have the English version there. So that's why I like it very much that we have the multi-line view. But one thing here, I would love to have the possibility also similar to the TagsManager, that I can enable this, and then on top of this element, I get your original text along with a button, so that I always have German, English visible if I need it. Because so if you want to change it, so I say, okay, probably data is not the right word. Okay, I click here, boom, the English version is gone. If you have much text, you just can't remember it. So this is the main problem. So if I click here, oops, the English version is gone. So that's why I think it would be nice if we click this button, we get the English text in front or in the bottom, I don't know. But then you have both versions of the text there for maintaining the translation. So that's why I was not very happy with the pop-up, because it always goes away if you click somewhere.
Yeah, you can copy and paste from it.
Current
workaround. I think then the way to do that is a checkbox at the top for whether to display the English text above the translated text.
Yeah, something like this. Yeah. I will play a little bit with this layout and probably add my buttons and some more information with the two-column layout, so that we can play a little bit with it.
Yeah.
And see if it works. But yeah, I get the impression though people are very very comfortable already with the version. So I have seen the group, and there is a Danish version already. So we have a Japanese version now, we have a Danish, we have a Greek version with the pre-release. So this is very, very promising.
Yeah, no, it's really exciting. I am very pleased. We've just been joined by Mr. Jones. Mr. Jones, Hangout for discussing the TiddlyWiki software. I don't know if that's what you expected, but at the moment it's a fairly deep. Oh, great. Okay. Let me add you to the broadcast, Mr. Jones. Would you like to? Okay, so Mr. Jones is not here any longer. Okay, so let's move on from the translation stuff. Well, actually, maybe not so much. Let's move on from the Translators Edition. One of the other things, Mario, that's on our list to discuss is to help me understand the needs of the German translation process, so that I can understand the edition structure that you've got and the additional facilities that we've discussed that that you need to be able to handle it all efficiently. But before we go into that, I wonder, Nathan, since you're patiently here, if it may be worth just asking you if there's any topics that you're keen to discuss.
Nothing in particular, really.
Okay. Well, we must take care that it doesn't turn into the Mario and Jeremy diving deeper and ever deeper into the translations vortex.
No, I think I think it's kind of an important thing, and I think that you know, there's some good stuff being covered. I'm enjoying listening to it, and I think that you've hit on a couple of good points.
One of the things that is quite fun about it, I think, is it's yet another pretty complicated user interface done in TiddlyWiki, and in order to do it, I didn't need to make any extensions to the core to add new filters or widgets or anything. So I'm quite pleased about it from that point of view. That, you know, TiddlyWiki's user interface facilities have grown very, very slowly, very small steps, in order to be able to render the user interface for TiddlyWiki itself that I was conceiving of. And for me, an open and interesting question is what else they're capable of. I think I've made this point before, that I'm really surprised that it's been possible to build TiddlyWiki 5 to this level of functionality with such a small set of user interface oriented widgets. That's the reveal widget and the list widget, the transclusion variables and so on. So to me, very small number of very simple mechanisms has turned out to be possible to do a UI as complex as TiddlyWiki. I think what the Translators Edition shows us is a kind of slightly different kind of complexity, because it's an application-specific user interface, so it it doesn't have to coexist with user data in the same way that a TiddlyWiki core feature has to be able to coexist in a TiddlyWiki with the user's own arbitrary data. So I'm kind of pleased that it's working out reasonably well. I did see something else that we might discuss briefly before going on to the construction of the German editions, and it just raises a couple of points. So Mario and I in the background have been discussing a pull request of his, which tries to fix some of the inconsistencies in the documentation for the command. So, for instance, adds decent examples to the command help text. So what I mean there is when you do TiddlyWiki help, we get a message, and then we can do help on a particular command. So we can go help server, and Mario's pull request. Oh, actually, in that particular example, there are examples, but Mario's pull request adds decent examples. And while we were doing it, we realized that the documentation references being able to do that to get a list of editions. In fact, oh well, I'm on the pre-release version, so that's now showing me the help for the new editions command, but help editions never showed a list of editions. So if I run the TiddlyWiki editions command, it outputs a list of all the available editions, and they're shown with the edition name and a description string. So one of the changes in the background to support this was to add a description field to the tiddlywiki.info file. So if I, here we go, for instance, the German edition, or a German edition, here you can see at the top of tiddlywiki.info there's a description field. The problem, I think, with this so far is that that list of editions, not all of them are useful for end users. So for end users, the way that you use editions is with the TiddlyWiki init command. So we say my new wiki and initialize it with a particular edition. And obviously the idea is that there would be editions for things like maths and GTD. Now, at the moment, in fact, a number of these editions are probably not useful in that regard. So, for instance, there's the Markdown demo edition. So, although if a user did that Markdown demo, they would end up with a new wiki that included the Markdown demo. It also includes the demo content that you can see on the Markdown demo page, which is probably not what the user would want. So what I'm thinking is that we need to add a further config field to the tiddlywiki.info file to indicate whether the edition should be listed. So for instance,
and if the description is there, then it's listed, and if there is no description, it's not listed?
Well, that's an interesting suggestion. What I was thinking of a separate flag so that one would be able to say edition all to get the full list. And yeah, I think that is kind of useful in a way.
But all makes more sense. Yeah. So there has to be a description for everything, so that you get the proper help text. Because otherwise you don't get any help text. Yeah.
So I think the ones that make sense here at the moment are some of the foreign language editions, but of course these German editions, they're not. I don't think they're necessarily a good starting point for an end user because they include all of the plumbing to share these two wiki folders, for instance.
Yeah. I just had an idea, but if you, for example, there may be a use case where I say, okay, I want to have, for example, if I want to create the German translation for Switzerland, you would want to start with the English translation, with the German translation, because most of it will be the same. So could we have a field in tiddlywiki.info which says, I don't know, skeleton or I don't know, templates or something like this. So if I say init, then it will use a skeleton, and if there is no skeleton field, it just clones the version.
You're saying, can we mark an edition folder to work in two modes? The default mode where the entire edition folder is duplicated, and the skeleton mode where presumably just the tiddlywiki.info file is duplicated.
Yeah, probably. Yeah.
I don't know. It seems that seems complicated. And the goal with editions is, that the editions that we offer are designed to be useful starting points for end users beginning to use TiddlyWiki. And so if we need to do that, it sort of feels as if the editions aren't targeted correctly. But then the real issue that we're dealing with here is that some of the editions, like Test Common JS, is it's possibly correct that it's treated as well. Where I was going to go with this is one of the other options is to introduce a wiki folder. So if I take the TiddlyWiki repo down to close all the folders. So at the moment we've got editions, and really this is actually that not all of these. One way of interpreting what I've just said is that not all of these are editions in the sense of being starting points for end users. So perhaps what we need is a new folder in here called wikis, and that we would put into that all of the wikis that are in the editions folder that don't constitute a starting point for reusing TiddlyWiki. I think that makes a good deal of sense for some of these editions. So the Test Common JS one, wherever it is here, as an example, by moving it into the wikis folder, it's still accessible and we can still run our tests, and it stops it ever showing up in the editions list. But there's maybe a marginal ambiguity about something like tw5.com. I think it's useful to be able to treat tw5.com as an edition, because it's useful to be able to get your hands on the raw content of tiddlywiki.com so that you can use it offline. But it's still, again, not really an edition in the sense that I would like the term to mean, of being a starting point. It's a delivery mechanism for a little pile of content. So I think that's the choice. Do we do it as a sorry, let me stop screen sharing. Do we do it by adding a flag to tiddlywiki.info to say I'm not really an edition, or do we do it by moving those things that are not useful as editions into a new wikis folder? What do you think?
I'm not sure, because at the moment when we are talking about editions, it's something that tells the users how to do something. For example, the German version, in that sense, is an edition, because there is some additional information about the wiki text, about what is TiddlyWiki for, how can you use it, and so on. So it is an edition.
But hang on. So you're saying there's documentation in the German edition, which is essentially translated versions of the documentation on tiddlywiki.com.
Yes, right. So if you have a look at
to me, that should be at tiddlywiki.com/de, so to speak. But I wouldn't expect it to be included in an empty German edition any more than I would expect the tiddlywiki.com content to be included in an empty English edition. So maybe
that's right. So the German version on languages DE, the index.html, has some content with it, and it has a download button for empty. But still there are some users that download the full version. Because at the very beginning they need the additional information, and then if they are comfortable with it, they just say, get the empty version and start going.
So that makes sense. That's the same. I mean, it mirrors the situation with tiddlywiki.com and empty.html.
Yeah, I think if we have a flag that says this is useful as a skeleton. Then you say TiddlyWiki editions, and then you only get the skeletons. Then you see, okay, but I want to have the German context, or I want to have TiddlyWiki.5, also TiddlyWiki.com. Then you can say TiddlyWiki editions all, and then you say TiddlyWiki, I don't know, my TiddlyWiki, init, tiddlywiki5.com.
So, okay, there's two alternatives here. One is that there is two German editions, an empty German edition and a German docs edition. The other possibility is that they're the same edition, and when one uses them, one has to make a sub-selection of whether you want the documentation or not. I'm not so keen on the second choice because it makes what constitutes an edition more complicated and indeed conditional on the options that you select. Whereas conceptually saying, give me this edition, always performing the same action seems simpler.
I think that I think I would kind of agree with the statement that you just made, where for this case I think that having two editions would be appropriate, meaning an empty edition and a full documentation edition. But you know, the sort of alternative option that you propose, while more complex, I think as sort of a more generalized thing where editions could in some way reference each other or inherit each other better, might be more useful for some broader cases. But yes, certainly more complex.
I'm already using the include wikis, so as Jeremy does with the tiddlywiki5.com, because my Austrian version includes the German version, or vice versa. I don't know. So there is one edition which has a lot of tiddlers, and the other one is just the different. What's different? So they both belong to each other. But I wouldn't be very happy if I need to create an empty edition, because then I have 4 editions. So I need an empty German Germany and an empty German Austria edition. So, and then I have 4 editions to maintain. So this is or let's say 3, yeah, because there's one edition with a lot of help text, and then the Austrian empty.
But the empty editions don't take much load. I mean, because you just set up their tiddlywiki.info files and they'd stay the same. You know, there'd be no reason to ever change them.
Yeah. Okay.
But I've realised that the challenge actually with the way that we're doing things at the moment. So you've got a generic German edition that is then the region-specific German editions include that using include wikis. Yeah. The problem then is that if I use the regional one of the regional German translations as a parameter to the init command, I don't get the full edition. I only get a copy of the wiki that includes the include wikis field. So that's problematical. It may be that the init command, if you init a wiki that has an include wiki, it's possible that it should recurse into the included wikis and copy those files too.
That's kind of exactly in a roundabout way what I was sort of trying to say. But I guess the main sort of use case that I really had in mind there was a little bit different. One thing I commonly find myself doing when initializing a new wiki, and I'll try and sort of add the languages into the context of this, but I'll say, okay, I want a wiki that is a server edition that also has the CodeMirror plugin and the D3 demo and this other thing, and maybe I want it, you know, with the German language docs. And doing that isn't as simple as sort of saying, hey, init command, here's what I want. Doing that, you know, involves sort of starting from one base and then sort of manually cherry picking things in. Yeah. Where if that init command could sort of build out that whole set of editions in some sensible way that, you know, kind of covers both of those cases and I think a lot of other potential cases.
Yes, I agree. That so at the moment our init command, all it does is, well, in fact, you can specify a series of edition names and it'll copy them one on top of the other, if you see what I mean. But its granularity is that of an edition, and what we'd really like is an alternative command that instead of, well, that maybe starts with a template edition, but as you say, allows you to explicitly specify the plugins that you want on the command line. So it would be a kind of an edition build command. Oh, that's a bad way of putting it, because we always use it for something else. But yes, I think that would be useful. It also would be something that has been discussed before. It's been quite handy if we had a user interface for it. So I don't know if you remember, but or I don't know, you may not have seen it.
TiddlyWiki guides, I think, huh?
Yes, exactly, TiddlyWiki guides. So, oops, I'll try and type it correctly. So TiddlyWiki guides includes a customizer where you can select the plugins that you want, and then it automatically generates a TiddlyWiki. Very useful facility. We've discussed it before. I remember that one of what this is doing could be done by upgrade.html. So upgrade.html has all of the core plugins in it. At the moment, it only inserts them in the wiki, in the generated wiki, if they were in the incoming wiki, but it could provide checkboxes to let you choose those plugins. Anyway, obviously I've now drifted over to talking about these facilities in the browser, but all I really mean is this kind of, what I'd like the experience to be is for people who come to TiddlyWiki for the first time, is they get to see a nice menu of editions that's easy for them to recognize and pick out the the edition that's most appropriate to them, but also allowing them to dive a bit deeper and customize the edition, mix and match features from different editions, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So let me just rewind the little stack here of what we've just been talking about. So I must say, talking about so going back to the beginning of the editions discussion, I think that what I favour at the moment is introducing the wikis folder, because the more I think about it, the more I think that the bits that are problematical, things like the test wiki and test common.js, aren't editions. And
so you want to introduce a new directory on the same level as editions, which is called wiki, which contains the stuff that's not really an edition. So, for example, language of tiddlywiki5.com and these things.
Well, I think not tiddlywiki5.com. I mean, that as things stand, I think I would make that be an edition so that it's easy for people to get a copy of the documentation, but I would flag it as being an ambiguity of that approach.
Uh-huh.
But yes, that's very helpful. There was one other. Oh yes, slightly.
But how do you get a German translation edition with the documentation then? If it's not initable anymore.
The German translation wouldn't be in the wikis folder.
Ah, okay.
The German, so as
so all the translations stay as edition, but
yes,
we get two new ones. So we get I don't know. So the German translation with the documentation would get a new name,
yeah,
and the empty ones is DED and DEAT. Okay.
I think that's what feels like
the ones, or let's say the German edition with the documentation is marked or not marked as an edition, but so it's not listed with -- edition.
So it would be under this proposal. So under this proposal, I think the ones that we'd lose, that we'd move into the wikis folder, would be test common.js, TW2,
okay,
probably upgrade, and I think all of the others would stay in the editions folder.
Also, okay.
The there's a whole bundle of issues around here. I mean, what we're really talking about is the command line user interface for TiddlyWiki. I think we're already in a reasonably good position where, for somebody who's never used the command line before, the commands and concepts necessary to install TiddlyWiki from npm and create a wiki folder and so on are, I think, massively simpler than a lot of other open source software projects that aren't as closely aimed at end users. But I very much think that we are on an ongoing mission to try and ruthlessly keep simplifying the process. That the situation we're in at the moment is that there are things that are easy to do on the command line that are useful and easy, and that are out of reach of people who only work in the browser. So I want to make it as appealing as possible for people to make the jump and start exploring the Node.js edition. And I think we've got a lot of opportunities to improve the process. One of the things that, again, Mary and I have been discussing that I think would make life a lot easier is to resolve the following problem. And again, if we go back to look at the editions, it'll be easier for me to show the point. So right now we've got the tw5.com edition, which I'm pointing to here, which has all the documentation tiddlers for tiddlywiki.com. And then next to it we have an edition called tw5.com-server, and it has some tiddlers that override the ones in tw5.com, and it uses include wikis to include the main tw5.com wiki. The reason for this is so that we can get the file system and TiddlyWeb plugins in place. So what we'd like to be able to do is to directly serve the tw5.com edition. But if I do that, and let's do it because it's fun. So if we try and serve, make ourselves verbose so we can see what's happening too. Is it serve or is it server? So now, bang, there it goes, and it's saying that we can go to a browser and open it, and if we open it, it all appears to work, and I can edit stuff. But the problem is, include those two plugins, it's not actually syncing. So as I create tiddlers, there is no network activity whatsoever. So at the moment, the only way that a plugin can get into a wiki when that wiki is built on the server is if it is listed in the tiddlywiki.info file. So that's why we've got the server one that lists those two plugins, and then the underlying tiddlywiki.com one that doesn't include those plugins. So I think the mistake here, well, or not the mistake, but the decision that I took right at the beginning that I want to review now was making TiddlyWeb and the file system be separate plugins. The concern that drove that was I wanted to make it abundantly clear that people could swap for a different adapter. So you could swap the TiddlyWeb adapter for a CouchDB adapter, and on the file system side, in other words, what we sync to on the server, you could also imagine people syncing to a locally installed database, and again, they'd need to substitute something else for the file system plugin. But in fact, of course, there are other ways that we can provide that flexibility. So the proposal is that we move these two plugins into the core. They would add 38 kilobytes or something to the current size of the core. And what it would then mean is that one would be able to directly serve a wiki like tw5.com, because one would no longer have the problem of needing to specify these additional plugins to be loaded. So if we did that again, going back to the list of editions here, that's our list of editions, and I think we've got 2 of them that are server editions. Yes, the German server edition and the tw5.com server edition. So that's part of the value and the relationship to what we've just been talking about, is it simplifies the listing of available editions. And as I say, there are some issues with doing it, because we'd need to put those modules in the core but make them configurable. It would, right now, when we visit tiddlywiki.com, obviously there is no, the TiddlyWeb plugin isn't here. So if that, and if I load it, if I include the TiddlyWeb plugin, as soon as it starts up, it tries to do its stuff. It tries to talk to the server. So we would need a mechanism that would be used when we build a static single file TiddlyWiki to say to the TiddlyWeb adapter, "Oi, don't do anything."
Yeah, and also I think that the file adapter, the file system adapter also needs to be blocked.
Absolutely, you need to be able to turn it off, because you've got your own adapter running. So that the syncer will need some configuration added, I think.
Did you have a look at the proposals I made on the GitHub issue?
Remind me. I'm sure I did. Yes. What?
I was thinking about a mechanism similar to the build mechanism.
Yeah.
That we have a server section that contains the commands, or let's say the information for the server.
So I think these are orthogonal. We could move. Hang on, let me screen share and I can show your proposal. So here, this is the ticket, 1011. And what I just said is that chunk up there, and only that chunk also explains some details about what would be involved.
Nathan, can you see something? You are screen sharing?
Good.
I can't see anything. Nathan, can you see something?
Yeah, I can see it fine here.
Okay.
Hopefully it's just.
Now I see. Okay, it needs some time. Okay.
So what Mario submitted was an example tiddlywiki.info file that adds a present section, and that present section specifies a different configuration to be used when when this wiki is loaded in server mode, and that's problematical because by the time we get to processing the server command, we've already loaded the wiki, so we already need to have decided which plugins to.
Okay.
But hopefully that would be obviated anyway by the change. And then here we've got configuration, the default configuration for the server, and then a slightly a refinement of that was showing how an alternative way of doing it would be to have a present section, which, just like the build section, lists all of the commands that are needed to serve the wiki. Now, in fact, this would already work. The build section can have server commands in it, so one can create a build target that starts the server. At the moment one does so, then the name build obviously becomes less useful. So it's possible that we should change that, but it does at least work. I think
I also did. If you go back again, I also did 2 new commands. There was the first one which says plugins, which just lists the plugins to add. Do you see that?
Yes, and this stuff is impossible as things stand, because by the time we're processing these commands, we've already loaded the wiki, and we need to know which plugins to load at the time we load the wiki. So this kind of declarative way of doing it would work better, but at the time that we load the wiki, we would need to know that we needed to run in server mode. But I think it's okay. I think that what we can do here is separate out a number of aspects of what you're recommending. So the first thing, this plugin stuff, we deal with that by stopping TiddlyWeb and the file system being plugins, and I'm pretty convinced that's the right thing to do, because it simplifies the client-server configuration considerably.
I'm not concerned about the file size or something like this, but I think if it's then easy to change the TiddlyWeb adapter for CouchDB or something like this, then I'm fine. Yeah.
There's server stuff. In fact, there's already a config field in the tiddlywiki.info, and it probably makes sense to just add a server entry here and put all of that stuff underneath it. And in fact, that default tiddler location, I think, is already supported in the config here. But yeah, I think that makes good sense.
But I think it would be different commands. For example, there you could have present index, present, I don't know, code mirror, present what is it, markdown or something like this. So this still makes sense because, for example, if I say present index, I want to have the tiddlyweb and file system, and maybe I want to have a different server that says present code mirror. Then I get the code mirror plugin or something like this.
Yes, I mean, I think.
How can we do this? Or how can we deal with this then?
Well, I'm not absolutely sure that. I mean, what you're asking for there is to be able to switch in and out the plugins that we load when we load the wiki. The sort of, at the moment, with plugins having to be loaded at startup, I think the sort of way that you could imagine that is actually that this plugins key here might be split up into named configurations, and we add a new command line parameter that when you load a wiki allows you to specify the configuration of that wiki. So I'm not that sounds reasonable, but it's a new abstraction, but it's quite a powerful one, having named configurations of a wiki that live in tiddlywiki.info. And then that would make
the file gets bigger and bigger and bigger, and I have a little concerns about this. So that it gets too complicated, probably.
Well, the tiddlywiki.info file, the goal has always been that we provide a user interface for manipulating it, because it's a JSON file, and so yeah, I mean JSON files are not great to process. We could also move to a. It doesn't need to be a JSON file. I mean, I think there's some advantages in it being so, but it could be something more like a multids file that was designed to be easier to type. I think generally here, so far, I've got the minimum amount of stuff possible in the tiddlywiki.info file. Most configuration is done within tiddlers, and that is nicely consistent because we already have to do some configuration in tiddlers. And I guess here, yeah, we're just nosing the edges of the practicality of sticking to that approach. So I think that's my plan going forwards, is to merge the plugins. Step 1, that buys us a lot of simplifications. Step 2, put the server configuration in the tiddlywiki.info file, and then we'll take it slowly, see if there are any further steps.
And tell me, what's about those additional files? For example, with tiddlywiki5.com server edition has the Google Analytics stuff with it, and how do you deal with this?
I may not be able to without inventing something new. So I think again I've got to draw a distinction between there are some problems that are very specific to tiddlywiki.com. So this Google Analytics handling, turning that off is because we've got Google Analytics in tw5.com. The fav icon is obviously so that I can more readily. I found that a problem frequently, and I think you've had the same thing, is I was typing into the single file edition thinking I was using this edition.
Yeah. So this fav icon is very useful.
So the fav icon, I do wonder. I mean, if we went for something like this, one of the things that one might want to have as a part of the named configuration was which fav icon to use, so that it would be easy to visually distinguish them. But some of these things are like configuration changes really to suit me and my authoring style. So I think that's roughly where I would be. That the Google Analytics problem is rather specific to me. This configuration is rather specific to me. But the fav icon is something I'd like to find a way to fix so that we'd get a different fav icon in client-server mode.
Yeah. Also, the configurations we discussed about the set field in the
yes.
And
can you just bear with me 1 second? I've just got to fly off. I'll be right back.
Yeah.
Mario, sorry, remind me where I interrupted you. Apologies.
Yeah, we were talking about the set field parameter in the tiddlywiki.info file with the raw possibility, because I needed it. Well, I wanted to have it as I want to rewrite the configuration for the Austrian and German edition, because I'm also using the German server version, and if I switch the language, then it saves it back to the to one file. And if I forget to reset it and create the pull request, it may happen that both languages have the same language setting.
Yeah.
And if we do a set field in tiddlywiki.info, then I think we could remove most of those config tiddlers.
So this is that. So the problem is that we have a set field command, and the set field command at the moment, I don't know why we're looking at it there.
Wants to have a template.
Exactly. So that's just. I can't spell it. Therefore, I can't find it. The set field command takes a filter, name of a field, and then rather than putting plain text into that field, it renders a template tiddler and then outputs it at a particular type. So the reason why we do that is because I wanted to not just replace the field value, but to modify it in order to make the external images stuff work. So if we take the canonical URI field of an image tiddler is set to, well, that template, which we can open. Do that. That template just includes the images part of the URL and then the double Erlang encoded title of the tiddler. So what we need is to be able to forgive me, sorry. We need something like
raw text. So I did yeah.
Yeah. Now, but as it happens, it's possible that there's something else that you can do to get around this, Mario, which is that you could load a JSON file. So within the wiki folder, you could create a, let's say if you had a new folder called JSON, and then, so you could do that, and then that JSON file can contain the literal definitions of some tiddler values.
Okay. So just not to modify the fields, but to preload them.
So it means I mean, of course, you could use a multids file as well. It doesn't need to be a JSON file. Given what we were just saying about JSON files not always being user-friendly, it might be that another format would be better. But that strikes me as being not bad, actually. It could it could clarify things. And it's also the way.
But which one will win? I have a tiddler in the directory structure, and I have this load. So which one will
win? Because the load would be executed after the wiki. So the tiddler in the wiki would get loaded when the wiki is loaded, and then that load command would be processed in the order it comes.
Okay, I'll test this. Yeah.
Great. And yes, and I mean not to say that setfield raw wouldn't be useful.
But setfield also still has a flag that it is experimental, but I think you rely on it, so you should probably remove the flag.
That is possible, but I'd forgotten that, and I mean because I think the real problem with it is its name, that it should be called something else, and I guess its experimental flag would let us do that. But anyway, I'm not sure that I see a huge advantage. I mean, a set command that allowed you to specify, you'd really want to be able to. Set tiddler. It's going to get pretty complicated for ways for people to specify more than the title and text. You could imagine a set tiddler where that was the title and the remaining parameter was the text of the tiddler. But as soon as you want to add tags or do a custom field.
Set fields in this configuration had the advantage that you could use a filter, so you could change the text field of all tiddlers tagged external image. So this is an advantage because the load JSON file can't do this.
Yes, that's true. Yes. I wasn't imagining the set tiddler, but you're right. It can take a filter. But anyway, it's the same thing applies. If it takes a filter and sets the text, how do we set other fields?
Yeah, but set tiddler is something different. Set field is we are using fields in the.
Well, okay, but I didn't type set field because we've already got a set field command, which is something different. So I did it.
So you want to have a new command. So
yes, so as an example, I've called that new command set tiddler field.
Okay.
But the reason why I called it set tiddler is because I would like to be able to, or I can think of use cases for setting fields other than the text field. And yet the syntax with a set command is pretty it's not obvious how to do that nicely.
Yeah, set field can change any field, I think. It's not only text. So you can select the field that you want to change.
So we'd be set, if we had set tiddler field, we'd have filter field name. Yeah. But I don't know. I think here well, I'd say I would accept a new command like that. I think I would want to be certain that we've captured enough flexibility, really, because having done this set field with rather a single purpose in mind, and then discovered that it is insufficiently general. Make sure the next
general. The only problem with the set field is that you have to create a template, and this makes the stuff complicated.
Well, I think that's quite a big problem actually. Because it makes it pointlessly indirect. So I'm accepting that we need a command that allows people to directly set field values. The concern is to make sure that new command is right, and that we don't have the same remorse about it afterwards as I think we've had about this guy.
I think there is one problem, for example, because if we have set tiddler field and someone wants to change the canonical URI, then they have to use this double HTML encoding.
Oh yes, so this new command will have to coexist with the existing one.
Yeah. But I think we still need to tell them, okay, so you can't use set tiddler field. You have to use set field with the right template, because you have to do some special encoding so that you get the URI right. Okay, this is the edge case, and then we'll have to do some support. Okay.
Yeah. We should rename that field command to something else.
Yeah.
And just keep the old name as a deprecated but valid name for it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. And I've done what I frequently do, which is accidentally use one of the live source files as a experimental scratchpad. So I shall discard that change. Let's have a quick look at other recent changes. Well, one happy observation is most of the changes are corrections from other people, so documentation corrections. This is a correction from Evelina to the table of contents macro, so that's great stuff. Oh yes, there's one other thing I've added, which was requested on the group, and it was to be able to customize search results. So basically now search results are shown in tabs. The default tab is list. The example here that I've got is a I can't find the pesky thing. Perhaps it's a... Oh, what am I talking about? So there's a new tag, tag search result. Search results, yes, here we go. So orgs list is an example of a tiddler tagged search results, and it contains basically a filtered timeline. So when I search for something in the list, I get the ordinary alphabetical list of results. In this orgs tab, I get a timeline. I get the same results, but arranged in the timeline. The thing that made it slightly non-trivial is that in the situation where there's only one tiddler with that tag, then we hide the tabs. So that means out of the box, you wouldn't see those tabs until you come and add a new example. So the driver for this was a guy called Felix, who's popped up on the group with a visualization based, I think, on Viz.js of, I can show you. Oh, here we go. So, forgive me for the time it took me to locate that. So what Felix would like is to be able to show the results of a search as a connected graph like that. What I've done is basically what he suggested, but with the additional refinement of hiding these tabs. So that's also the type of modification I'm quite keen to be making at the moment, of making it easier for providing the right splice points for third-party plugins to extend TiddlyWiki.
Jeremy, would it be possible that I have the search results in addition to the reason and content tab and this?
Yes, we could. There's a particular proposal. Is that we do two things. The first is make it so that all of the elements of the sidebar can be configured in a similar way to the way we can configure toolbars. So one would be able to switch off and on, for instance, the search box inline in the sidebar, and then to make it so that one can choose which of these tabs to display in exactly the same way. And just as we do with the offering a bunch of tools that aren't displayed by default, we'd have a bunch of tabs that would be off by default, such as the table of contents.
Yeah, because I think the table of content should be part of empty somehow, because there is always the request, so they see
And
it on TiddlyWiki.com.
The problem with inserting it into empty is it makes it hard for people to remove it if they don't want the table of contents tab, unless we added those checkboxes.
Yeah. Probably a plugin or something like this that makes it easy, because there is some explanation you need to do, because they have to tag the root tags in a special way, so they need some documentation anyway.
I mean, the alternative, I mean, it's again actually it's an orthogonal suggestion, is that the contents tab can detect when there is nothing tagged table of contents and display an empty message which says tab some content with tag some content with table of contents to make it appear here. But I for the moment I think I'm not, well, it set me off thinking about a few things. There was a quite an interesting blog post from, what are they called, Ghost. So these guys, yes, okay. So Ghost is a kind of new blogging platform, new in the sense it came out in the last 10 years. The post that popped out yesterday was them talking about their, well, gosh, you can tell the difference between me and a startup. That they look at a sort of pipeline of users, and they are worried. The thing they're tracking is conversions. So the number of people who end up at ghost.org who go on to buy a subscription. And their interesting conclusion, well, it's quite a long post actually, is that the three events which affected the subscription conversion rate most significantly was publishing a post, uploading a theme, adding a custom domain. And the one that's interesting is uploading a custom theme. My takeaway from this is that if we can make it easier for people to configure the appearance of TiddlyWiki, that once they have done that, it will make them feel more inclined to continue the process and start downloading it and using it. So I'm beginning to think that we need to review the experience of empty.html. So the text that's here is incredibly old. And when you think of the interface that we were just looking at in the Translators Edition, this doesn't attempt to do anything like that. It's just some very bold text about getting started. So right at the beginning, I'd imagined the getting started being a wizard that takes you step by step through. It could prompt you to. Step one could be a prompt to type a title for your wiki, and then step two could be, okay, now save your wiki, and then we would, on reloading it, we would know that the wiki had been saved, and we'd be able to move them on to the next step. And the steps could include lots of things that are quite easy but a bit buried, like choosing a color palette. So step 3 could be choose one of these useful color palettes, and choose your language, and so on. Well, I say choose your language. Of course, it's too late by then you need to go and install the plugin to.
I think this would be nice. So if there is a I don't know, an edition that has all the stuff in it, and then has this wizard. So you first say, okay, choose a color palette or choose your title, choose a color palette. I don't know. Do you want to use it as GTD? So you click it and then you get the plugin. Then
no, but that part of it would emphatically not be the case, because they get to getting started once they have chosen their edition. So step one is on tiddlywiki.com, look at the list of editions, choose the edition that's right for you, and then each edition would have an edition, or could have an edition specific getting started wizard.
Okay, yeah.
So a well-written, a polished edition would customize every part of the getting started experience to be specific.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it's tricky because, or a thing I find tricky at the moment is there's no shortage, gloriously, there is no shortage of feedback on TiddlyWiki. So both here in the main TiddlyWiki group and over on the dev group, there's quite a lot of traffic that, for me, boils down to additional features that I need to implement on TiddlyWiki in order to make that person deal with that person's use case. And so there's when you look at the list of commits, all of these are driven by other people. And it's a very small number of things that I choose to do, if you see what I mean. And one of them here, obviously, was adding the Translators Edition in the first place. And I think what's difficult is that whatever the devil is the most important next thing to add to TiddlyWiki isn't necessarily anything that people are asking for in the group, because, well, particularly if we're trying to, a lot of the group requests are actually about flexibility. They're actually people who would like more options, who would like to understand how to do complicated things. Whereas I suspect that our big problem, or TiddlyWiki's big problem, is still actually much, much simpler than that. It's for people who have arrived at tiddlywiki.com. How do they figure out what this thing is? How do they get started? How do we improve their chances of success? So one of the things that's on my list is to do a new getting started video that would be presented within the Hello There Tiddler. And that's simply because that reflects a very common approach for websites that you land on the .com, and your first invitation is a 30-second video to understand what's going on. And this stuff about getting started is just in the same category, really. So I appreciate feedback on this stuff, but because I think it's hard for all of us to put ourselves back in the minds of somebody who's approaching TiddlyWiki for the first time. So
yeah, as you said, I think it was in the I don't know, one of the latest Hangouts. So that there was a guy which just uses the simple to-do list with the checkboxes, and he was perfectly fine.
Yeah.
So, yeah, with the stuff. So yeah, I think there should be some really easy, some very basic TiddlyWikis that you can download, and then you use it for a while, and then you say, okay, I want to have this, or I don't know, I want to have an archive for my to-dos. How can I do this? And they send a post to the list, and then you can say, okay, do this and that. But then you got them already.
Yes, that's right. It's all about winning them in the first place.
Yeah.
And we have discussed this before. For me, everything is up for grabs at the moment. TiddlyWiki.com intentionally closely resembles TiddlyWiki as users use it, but I don't believe that needs to be the case. We've talked about how we could make TiddlyWiki.com be more like, not entirely like, but more like Talkie, where we've got full bleed tiddlers with diagrams and text, that encourages you to read just by scrolling down. And yeah, it's the area that I want to continue to put effort into, even though, you know, when I look at this, the sorts of things that needle me are things like I can't configure that, I can't move these buttons to up here. When I do that, there should be a button here that pops up the entire sidebar so that I can use it without permanently switching it on. Loads of stuff that, but, you know, really that stuff is all details compared to the central challenge of making TiddlyWiki more comprehensible to people.
Yeah, I think what's also missing is somewhere some reviews on big sites, for example, because yeah, we are out of beta now, and it would be nice if there would be some reviews from others that drive some new users to tiddlywiki.com.
Yes, I think that there's. I mean, one way of saying that is I think there's actually quite a lot of things that I could be doing, should be doing, that have that are not about improving TiddlyWiki itself, but rather about communicating better about it. But my nature rather is faced with a challenge, try and turn it into a programming challenge. And so that's why I do tend to always think of these tasks in terms of how can I improve TiddlyWiki so that, etc. But yes, I think some attention would be a jolly good thing.
Yeah, and I also think I think the new translator stuff is really great because we have, I don't know, it's out for a week now or something like this.
Yeah.
And there is already 3 translations, 3 new ones.
And it's not even properly built. I mean, when 5.15 comes out, we'll link to it from tiddlywiki.com. We'll make a clearer path for advertising it to would-be translators.
Yeah, so I think this would be really great. So if we have, I don't know, 30, 40 different languages, that would be great fun. But then tiddlywiki.com gets big.
And then upgrade.html gets big because it has a copy of every plugin in it. But yes, some of these are nice problems to have. So my plan is to do the file output stuff for the Translators Edition. To fold in that, sorry, it was Greek and Spanish, I think, was it?
We have no, it's Greek and Danish.
Greek and Danish, yes.
Yeah, and I have a link to a Dropbox link from Japan, from the guy, Makoto-san, and I can send the link to you. So I think it looks pretty much finished.
That's amazing.
Yeah, so I'll send the link to you. I told him it looks good to me, and he should send a pull request to you with some information about if it was difficult, or with some feedback if it was difficult and what was funny and what was not so funny. But probably this.
Yeah, I mean, I think probably his delay is making a pull request, and in fact he can. I'm very happy if he submits it.
No, I said he should send the file to you, not the pull request.
Okay,
so the pull request is sent the file to Jeremy.
I see. I see what you mean.
But I think the feedback is the
yes, it's very. I mean, I think obviously with 3 translations done with the new Translators Edition, I think we can make some inferences for ourselves. One of them is that as I'd kind of hoped, the task of translating is evidently one of those funny things, like, I don't know, painting a fence, that's quite a long task, but it's very repetitive, and that you can kind of get into a little zone, and I suspect that one of those translations might not take more than 3 hours or so to do.
Yeah, yeah. The first translation I did with GitHub was about 2 or 3 hours. Yeah. So it's just typing, and then I think the time-consuming part is compiling it and have a look where in the user interface is it, and does it look good, or is the writing okay, and all this stuff. But translation itself is I don't know, is about 1 or 2 hours typing, and the rest is polishing.
Yeah.
So
it's,
and polishing is fun anyway. So this is you change it a little bit and then have a look and then say, okay, this is better. I leave it that way. So this is already the fun part.
Yeah. No, I'm really pleased. As I say, it's something that I hope we can make the content editing process as easy too.
Yeah, and I think what's funny with the browser translation is that you can really see it live. So you change something, then you go to the control panel, and then you see the tabs changed. That's nice. Yeah, so you really can see it. So I think it's more like playing a game, a translation game, and I think this is it's nice.
Yeah, gamifying translation.
Yeah.
It's funny, another reflection from me is that way back, I don't know, 6 years ago or so, Martin Budden at Osmosoft managed the translations for TiddlyWiki Classic. And one of the conversations that we would repeatedly have was whether we should be using a standard translation toolkit, and there is one, and I can't remember what it's called, gettext or something. But there's a very commonly used sort of 15-year-old way of, with a whole tool chain of creating translations. And Martin was arguing very strongly that we should use the off-the-shelf products that might be familiar to our translators and would allow us access to a wealth of external tooling. And at that time I said my position was, well, look, TiddlyWiki is, and it's supposed to be an environment for editing small items of text and for seeing them in different contexts. And my argument was that if TiddlyWiki wasn't a good environment for translators to create translations for TiddlyWiki, then that might be a sign that TiddlyWiki wasn't a good environment for editing small items of text, which obviously I don't believe. So it's funny for me, but TiddlyWiki 5 continues to give me the opportunity to sort of bring to, I'm not sure what the word is, bring to a close questions that have been open for a long time. I've been blithering on about doing translations like this, say, for 7 years.
Yeah. I also think that the Japanese guy, he's a mechanical engineer. Yeah. So this was I think as he started the conversation, this was one of his first sentences. So he's not the programmer, and he doesn't know GitHub, but he would try. Yeah. And then I don't know. 5 days ago or something, I sent him the link to the new translation stuff, and 2 days afterwards there was the finished translation. So
it's very good, very good situation. Okay, so we'll draw to a close. I forgot to mention at the beginning of the Hangout, of course, that we've had summertime changes. Glad you both were not confused by the shift in time. And obviously we'll be at this time now through till the end of March next year. The one thing that I mustn't forget is when we did the anniversary hangout on the 20th of September, one of the things that we discussed then was how nice it was to have a hangout at a weekend which enabled different people to attend. I said then that what I thought I might try and do is to continue the current Tuesday Hangouts, but have occasional weekend Hangouts, and I must do that because otherwise it won't get done. But guys, any other comments or thoughts from you? Otherwise, we'll close for this week. Anything from you guys?
No, I'm fine.
Excellent. Guys, well, thank you very much. We'll close the broadcast at this point and stay online for a few minutes. But as I always say, we really appreciate the time that you're giving up to this. It's incredibly useful. Great for me to have your feedback, and so thank you very much. And goodbye to everybody. Thanks very much for joining us. Look forward to seeing you next week. Cheers. Bye-bye.